I'm going to go ahead and hit the record button because there are some people that were interested in this that are in a different time zone in Europe. So it's nice to have that interest. And I think we'll go ahead and get started with introductions. I'll introduce myself. I'm Samira Anderson, and I'm going to be moderating this session. I'm a professor at the University of Maryland in the Hearing and Speech Sciences Department, and I uh, was an audiologist for many years before going back and getting my PhD. So I do have a clinician scientist background. And I'm here moderating. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Clinician Scientist Committee for the Association for Research in Otolaryngology. So I want you to encourage everybody to, if you're at ARO, to attend the networking night meeting that we always have Monday night, or consider joining the committee. And there's also, I'll put in a plug for the Audiology Clinician Scientists group that is also available. So I'm going to go ahead and let the rest of you, because I'm not supposed to talk that much about myself. I'm just moderating. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Matt Fitzgerald to go ahead and introduce himself.
I know I have no shame talking here, so this makes it easy. So I'm Matt Fitzgerald. I'm an associate professor and the chief of audiology at Stanford. Like many of you in this room, I think I've worn different hats at different points of time in my career. Like Samira, I was a clinical audiologist. That's where I first met Devin, actually, once upon a time, back in our days at Henry Ford. PhD at Northwestern. Then I did a postdoc in basic science at cochlear implants at the NYU School of Medicine, and was on faculty at NYU for a few years before I came out to Stanford. So I was excited to see this. I think I bugged Samira about something like this for people who really are kind of truly seeing patients and doing science and the joys of administration that we all love so much. And so it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to talk to all of you.
Thank you. Moving on to Devin McCaslin.
Oh, well, yeah. Thanks for having us on, Samir. And I want to thank ARO. This is just a great opportunity. If you're not a member of ARO, you need to join ARO, best science out there. So I'm Devin McCaslin. I'm a professor in otolaryngology. I'm a professor in biomedical engineering, and I'm the director for communication sciences and disorders. Did my PhD at Ohio State. Spent a fair amount of time at Henry Ford. 15 years at Vanderbilt, then Mayo Clinic, and now more recently I'm at the University of Michigan now. So again, thanks for having me, Samir.
Thanks, Devin. Okay, moving on to Vicky.
Good evening, everybody. Vicki Sanchez. I am an associate professor at the University of South Florida, the chief of audiology, the director of research for the Department of Otolaryngology. And I'm also a product of University of South Florida. I got both my clinical doctorate in audiology at USF as well as my PhD. But I spent a good amount of my time in my training years at the Bay Pines VA, where I had the opportunity to learn and work with Sherry Smith a little bit, and then found my place back at the University of South Florida, growing the audiology division within the ENT department. I'm so happy to be here, especially among some of these great clinician scientists, and look forward to our discussion. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Vicki. And then lastly, Sherry Smith.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Sherry Smith. I am an associate professor here in the Department of Head and Neck Surgery and Communication Sciences at Duke University. And I got my AUD and PhD at the University of Florida. I'm also the chief of audiology here at Duke, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight.
Thank you. So yeah, this was actually, I'll give credit to Matt Fitzgerald. This was his idea to get a group of people that are involved in all three things: administration, clinic, and research, which that seems like quite a lot. So we're going to talk about how you manage that. And I have some questions that I'll be asking, and then we'll leave some time for people to ask questions at the end. So the first question I'm going to ask is, when you look at your current role, where do you feel the most tension between clinical care, research, and administration? And what does that tension look like in your day-to-day work? And let's start with Matt Fitzgerald.
Yeah, no, that's I think this kind of some ways speaks to the heart of academic medicine. I'm fond of one of my pet sayings is the clinic is a beast which must always be fed, you know, and so whether that is you're seeing patients yourself, whether that is the joys of just kind of making sure that the division or your department of audiology is kind of going in the direction that it needs to go, and then navigating those roles while maintaining research. So I personally I personally feel the tension often in making sure that I have sufficient time to think. It is very easy to I think get bogged down. Like, you know, we were joking before many of you came on about I just do whatever is on my calendar. And, you know, Jawala works with closely with me. She's here. I mean, she knows exactly what kind of a mess my schedule can be like. And I think unfortunately that leads sometimes to like fragmented attention, you know, where it's like, you know, and so that time to sit down and think. So to me, that's where I feel the most tension. I mean, at Stanford, one of the great joys of my life is the adult. I oversee the adult and pediatric audiology practices. And at Stanford, those are two completely separate institutions, which means I get to deal with two sets of administration, you know, which is every bit as fun as it sounds. So I think that's you know, I love what I do. I think we have amazing opportunities to do things. This is I think it's you can do things in academic medical centers you can't do otherwise. But I think the tension really is carving out time so that you can think and so that you can write and you can do the things that you want to do, particularly on an academic basis. And that's where I feel that most.
Great, thank you. Vicky.
Well, I would say very similar things. And you kind of, Matt, you remind me some of the ways that I handle the tension is to protect my time in order to be creative in my writing. And I want to do that when I'm feeling the best that I can be too. So, for example, I try to preserve my writing times in the morning and then save my afternoons for more meetings and administrative things or discussions, because that tension is real. You're going to get pulled in lots of different directions. And if you find yourself just putting out fires after fires, some of the most important work that's going to lead you to promotion and productivity and to the things that are going to be really counted for on, you're not going to be able to get them done. So I'll just emphasize all your great points, Matt.
Thank you. Sherry?
Yeah, following very similar to what Vicky does. I think the tension does lie with having the three components of the role constantly at odds with each other, depending upon how much effort you have allocated to each, can also fluctuate over time. But I do, as well as Vicky, I don't block my mornings, Vicky. I block some days. Like these 2 days are research days. No meetings can be scheduled at all on those days. And you just try to be flexible as possible and sticking to your schedule. I think that's the tension is real, but I think it can be manageable.
Thank you. Devin?
Yeah, I think the other three panelists certainly covered this. I mean, I think how I see it, I see all three as important. None that are more important to her, but I see them all as important. And I think the key is that they operate on very, very different timelines. So, like clinical care, I'm the guy on call. If someone doesn't come in to do clinic, then I get called to go fill that schedule in the Michigan Balance Center, right? So I could be whatever I'm doing. I could be writing a grant. I could have a deadline. The patient is going to trump everything. So I got to go down and I got to see the patient. Research requires that protected time, right? That long-term thinking. So I hear everybody blocking schedules, right? But then if the call center falls apart, right, you're going to get a call from administration going like, look, your call center, nobody there. So then there's no access and the patients aren't getting scheduled. So it's, you know, it's really the day-to-day challenge is really the urgent, I guess I would say, often competes with the important, right? So there may be, you know, the grant is important, but the call center is urgent, and that's how you're going to get called. So it's a challenging approach to try to manage all these because you can plan your day. You know, I see the schedule as this is kind of what might happen today, but it never turns out what that is. So I guess that's my answer, as crazy as it is.
And thanks, everybody. I know I'm not supposed to talk about myself, but I will say that when I had I admired when I was doing my PhD, I admired Pam Souza because she spent, a half day in the clinic every week. And I said to her, I want to be like you because I thought I want to continue to do clinic. And then she said, don't do it until you get tenure. And then after I
Don't
got
do it.
tenure,
Just waving you off.
and then I never had
Right.
time. So really admire everyone that has
Exactly.
been able to keep your foot in the door because that was my dream, and that died. So,
Your
um,
dream died. That's so sad. I like it.
well, so anyway, moving on. When competing demands arise across clinical care, research, and administration, how do you decide what takes priority in the moment? I think, Devin, you kind of touched on that just now, but you want to elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, no. I mean, again, I think of priority as you used in that question. It's really about its impact, I think, and accountability. And so when I worked at Mayo Clinic, if you remember, Pam, you were in Minnesota with me. Maybe we were there. I don't know if we were there at the same time. There were three shields in the Mayo Clinic. That's their logo. But there's one shield that is bigger than the other. You can't really tell, but the one in the center is the biggest, and there's two side ones, and it's education, patient care, and research. And the patient care shield is the best. And I think it sort of answers this, at least in the environments that we live in, is that the direct effect of patient outcomes is that's number one. So, like I say, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, if a patient has a problem, I'm going to take that. That is the reality. I'm a clinician. I have 2 days of clinic. Many administrative tasks we can delegate, hey, manager, whoever, can you go handle this? Research subjects can be rescheduled. We did that this week already, rescheduling people because of things. So, these, decisions require direct involvement. And I guess I've learned that prioritization is less about what is most important overall and more what's going to have the greatest consequence if it isn't addressed now. And that's typically patient care. So that's kind of how I feel.
Thank you. Sherry.
I agree with Devin. Patient care comes first, right? But I guess to add on something different from Devin, it's just so supporting the clinicians who are providing the patient care. As a clinical administrator, I have my own patient care, and those my chart messages come in, and you have to be responsive, and you still have to manage your caseload. But I think also helping the clinicians and equipping them to manage in the clinic so that the patients are served is really important, and giving them that leeway to step up and help each other out and help the clinical leadership team help each other out. I think that's really important. But yes, patient care has to come first.
Vicki?
Same. I will not argue against that. Patient care has to come first. I remember being at the VA, and my patients were all gentlemen that were very much like my father. And I enjoyed being able to say that I was taking care of my father in that type of environment. And that kind of stuck with me as a young trainee. And as I continue, every patient in front of me, I want to take care of like a family member of mine. And I would hope that everyone in our clinic is doing the same thing. There's sometimes more acute emergencies that happen, and those patients have to have, that test or that evaluation or that treatment right then and there. And then there's the patients that you really get to have long-term bonds with because they're managing chronic health conditions. And so the patient demand is there every single day and for the long term. I love Sherry's response about making sure to support the clinicians. So not just the patients that are on your schedule, but all the patients that are coming through your door are being taken care of. And just to add a little bit about how I think we do a pretty good job of that is to make sure we have kind of team leaders within the clinic. It's very nice to be called the chief of audiology, but really we have subject matter experts that are responsible for our pediatric care, our vestibular care, our equipment and operations. There's a lead that does those things. So to really make sure that nothing falls through the cracks, there's a little bit of a shared responsibility along my team, which is really helpful.
Thanks, Vicki. Matt?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're broken record here. I will say that something to think about this. Every center, academic medical center, is both same and they're both unique. in terms of like what the structure is, in terms of like who reports what and who reports where. But the common thread is always, and you see this are the physician partners, the patient care part comes first. And this is, and I, when I'm interviewing people, even people on research positions or for fellowships or whatever, this is the thing I bring up because whereas we value the research, we want the research, we can do things in a medical center you can't do. I think they're much harder to do in more traditional academic environments. But, that comes with, what's the big picture? What's the mission here and what are we trying to achieve? With regard to like, empowering your staff, I mean, I think if you're going to survive in a role like this, you really I think it's mandatory in many regards. And even there's your immediate support staff and there's the people kind of all the way down. Like, if people like pay attention in the clinic, I like take like, I call them morale walks, like twice a day through the clinic. Just kind of come through, pop down, see what people are doing, chat with people, just check in, make sure everything's going okay. And I kind of try to do that once in the morning when I need a break and once in the afternoon, assuming I'm not seeing patients myself. But the patient care always comes first. That's, like I said, the clinic is a beast, which must always be fed, and it's our job to kind of keep it running and keep it fed.
Um, do you think true balance across these roles is achievable, or is it more about shifting focus over time? And how has that played out in your career? And if you're doing these three roles, I also wonder, like, how are you able to have a life outside of the job? If you're doing these three things, like, is it possible to have balance in your personal life? Sherry?
I'm terrible at work-life balance. So I usually talk to my team members of like, don't do what I do. And it's really hard when you have young kids at home. When I was a little bit younger and had a few young kids at home, that made it a little bit more challenging. Do I think it's managing the three roles is achievable? I don't know if true balance is ever going to be achievable. So I think it's really kind of shifting your focus over time, depending upon what is happening in the moment in the clinic with admin and your research agenda at the time. I don't think you can plan for equal balance always. It's always going to be a shift, and you just have to prioritize. What's a deadline that you have to achieve at the moment? What's the crisis that you have to achieve? And just really, to me, balance comes from soliciting your team member support and really delegating and working as a team, so it kind of relieves the pressure a little bit.
Thank you. Vicky?
I'm thinking of that question of balance and listening to Sherry's response. And I'm glad she said, no, she's not that great out of it, because I'm also not that great out of it. And maybe that's okay too, to say we're not so good at all things, right? Balance is hard. And when I think of balance, I think of there's like this picture in my head of this dog that's on a tricycle, that's on a high wire, who's balancing a cat on its head, which is balancing plates. And they're balancing, like that is balance happening. No one's falling off, but it is chaotic. And that's kind of how I feel how balance is happening. So for me, sometimes it's a little bit smooth sailing, and I can juggle things a little bit better. Other days, it feels like the balance is way off, and then I need to find ways to get back to something that's more manageable. So it's never a constant, but it's something just like, our own physical balance. You have to actively participate in it. And I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that balance is somewhat manageable, but it takes a lot of work to try to manage it.
Thank you. Matt?
I don't think I balance at all. I think it's just shifting attention and resources where you need it. You will find, when you're sometimes the clinic needs just subsume everything, And I've had stretches, for example, where when we've been in a real bind, where I've seen patients every day, 5 days a week, for months at a time, and just picked up meetings kind of before and after. And then there are other times where, it's again when you have research demands coming through, and I would argue it's just a matter of you want things to be balanced, but ultimately I think you're shifting attention to what needs attention there. And I think the goal is to try to protect as much time to do that thought and the science and the stuff that you want to do. And, so I like to joke, most of the time I feel pretty good if I'm just moderately overextended. And my goal is to not feel galactically overextended. And if I can do that, then I feel like we're okay. So that's all right. To me, that's just part of the gig, and that's fine. And it's invigorating and it's exciting because again, we can do things you can't do otherwise. But I don't think I balance anything. I just think I just shift attention where it needs to be, and I try to give that my complete focus while I'm there, and then try to move it to something else.
Thanks. Devin?
Yeah, I think everybody covered it. I don't really like the term work-life
Wait, we're not
balance.
hearing you, or at least I'm not.
Can you hear me? No? Can't hear me?
Can people hear him?
No, we can't hear you, Devin.
So finally, you did what most of us have been trying to do for years. This is great. No, I'm teasing. One sec. Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to you. All right, so probably earlier in your careers, you weren't thinking, hey, I want to be an administrator. That's my goal in life. So, you know, I don't know how it came out that you did clinic first, then research, or vice versa, but how did, adding these administrative responsibilities, how did that reshape your identity as a clinician scientist, for better or worse?
I mean,
Vicky.
yeah.
Okay, I'll go first. Um, so thinking of this question, it makes me think of some of my role models and my mentors, and they were people who were in leadership roles and chairs of departments and running major operations. And I don't think I ever said I would love to be in administration, but I sure said I would love to have responsibilities and excitements and accomplishments like some of my mentors and role models have. So I think that's kind of what sparked my
One,
interest in these types of,
one,
of
two.
opportunities. And I think that it really has shaped my
One,
identity
two.
as a, I hear you, Devin. You sound perfect. You're back.
I'm just checking it out. Test one, two, three.
You're good. You're good.
Sorry, I'm killing you. I'm not turning it off. Sorry. Keep going.
The identity question to the clinician scientist, I think role as an administrator, you have to be very organized, very structured. I think that has helped me in my research questions and also managing data in research projects. And then vice versa, I think my research hat has really helped my administrative skills as well. I take a lot of a research-minded approach, a data-driven approach with making decisions on how to, make a big decision. Should we bring on more audiologists? Should we change X, Y, and Z? And it's nice to have those research skills to support those big decision makings.
Thanks, Vicky. Devin, maybe you could answer both the questions, the one about balance and then
Yeah.
administrative responsibility shaping your career as a clinician scientist.
Yeah. I'll just answer real. I don't like the word work-life balance so much anymore. I think I'm the oldest person on this call, and so what I've come to believe is it's more like a work-life integration, or I like work-life harmony. And I think if you can figure out a way to balance, and balance exists over long times, right? You got to grant, you got to dedicate as everybody said, time to that, and there's periods where administration becomes a primary focus because you got some crazy programmatic initiative. But I think you have to be happy at work and you have to figure out what that is. And when you're happier at work, you're going to be a better partner at home. You're going to be a better family person. If your family life is good, you're going to be better at work. And so I feel it's balance seems to suggest as I've thought about it, because I've struggled with it, it's saying one has to replace the other. There has to be one or the other. And I think you have to somehow get those two in harmony in order to be successful in both at the same time. So I guess that's all I'll say about that. Yeah. In what ways have your administrative responsibilities reshaped your identity? I think administration has expanded my perspective. Nobody got into this to do dashboards, I don't think. I mean, I didn't, right? Samira, you came from a private practice, all of us, said, hey, I think audiology would be fun. We'll do some clinic. And we did all that. As a research, you focus on these specific scientific questions. As administrator, what it's done is it's more broadly let me start to look at systems, look at people, how to create an environment where others can succeed. I think that's really the key. I think the elephant in the room that we don't talk about is that how do I dare say it? Our profession is 90% women. And I think that that's the elephant in the room. And I think we have to, as administrators, you have to, as a leader in an administrator and the head of an audiology program, we really need to, come to, recognize that leadership is not just about managing operations or budgets, it's about creating a culture, right? That is meaningful for these people, free of harassment, free of, bias. I really think that that's, it's more than that. And I think I've really become heavily involved in, early career clinicians supporting women to pursue leadership roles. As I've learned as a leader, the microaggressions, I don't have any of the, I don't experience those issues that many of the clinicians that I work with do. And I think that, it's really, that's where I feel like I can I can move the needle in administration by really managing those issues and really pushing hard to make sure everyone gets to respect their due. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. And you can cut me out if that's too crazy.
Sounds great. Thank you. Sherry?
Yeah, just to maybe take a different approach, I think I've become a better clinician scientist because of the management of people approach or aspect of the clinical administrator role. Over time, when you manage people, you develop leadership skills, you develop better ways to communicate, conflict resolution, better ways to support your team members and to try to elevate them. And I think through that you learn skills when you engage in that work. And that's helped me to better manage research projects, better manage, running clinical trials and better manage a lab environment as well. So I think really focusing on the people and engaging with them, empowering them, partnering with them has really helped me as a clinician scientist.
Thank you. Matt?
Just to give it a slightly different perspective. I view a lot of things as like we do things we might not want to do in order to do the things that we do want to do. I mean, and that's true whether you're in pure academia or anywhere. We all have to do things we might not love, in order to get to do the things we like to do. So it's easy to say the administrative part is part of that. But I think, the advantage of that also is you get a sense as you learn how things work. And when you know how your institution works and how healthcare works, that can influence kind of how you think or how you approach certain issues. For you to want to translate, like I've long joked, I want to submit a special seminar to ARO called Difficulties in Translating Things in Audiology Practice, or Why I Can't Put Your Silly Test in My Clinic This Week. So things of this sort, I think but I think really this kind of, when you understand how things work, that can shape kind of what you do and how we go about things. And again, I view a lot of this as like, if I want to shape the culture at Stanford in our department, if I want to shape clinical practice, okay, if I want to translate things, then you have to kind of put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. And this is a big part of why I left basic science and cochlear implants, which I loved dearly. I love my time doing that. But if you want to do certain things, if you want to really try to shape things, then you have to get involved there. And so that means I don't always love all parts of it, but I do like knowing how things work, and I do like that opportunity to do that. And that's for me, that's kind of so I view it as an opportunity. If you want to do certain things and make certain changes, this is what you got to do. And we all pay the cost, so to speak. And whether, we are in a university environment or anywhere, this is just one more part of it.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And Matt, let's stay with you. Can you share an example of a time when investigating in one area required you to scale back in another area and how you navigated that
Yeah,
decision?
well, of course. But look, I mean, I had to stretch. Culture change is hard. And when I started at Stanford, we were trying to, my pet phrase is everything we do here has to meet the academic, educational, and clinical mission at Stanford. And net getting that culture, it's easy to say things, but you know, actually living that culture, it takes time and effort. And I had some people leave early on in my tenure, and that resulted in, and when the clinic is short-staffed, remember the clinic has got to run. So I've had, or post-COVID, when we open back up, I've had stretches where we've had months at a time where I'm covering clinic full time. Because I think my institution, I love Stanford, but we've been chronically understaffed since I walked in the door. And I've been kind of beating this drum again and again and again. But that means when something happens, your margin for error is about zero. So I've had to take at times to take a shift back on the research or the other parts to make sure that the clinical needs are met. I actually pivoted my research, some part of my research interests I took a really close look and, could I do the type of work I was doing at NYU? And I could do parts of it, but I couldn't do all of it. But I saw opportunities, here as well. And so that's where a lot of my research pivoted in the last few years. And so this is, so in some ways, like, so sometimes you just have to prioritize one thing or another. But sometimes I think in situations like these, you look for what opportunities are there. I mean, every single one of us are institutions that do certain things very well, and so how do you leverage those sorts of, how do you take advantage of that? Do you pivot your research in some ways to leverage that? What does your clinic do well? What capacity do you have? And so I think these sorts of things, again, it's opportunities to kind of shape that. And so that's where, I mean, yeah, it's investing in one, pulled back in another. I kind of view it more as like, looking at opportunities that are there. And of course, you got to make sure things run, but that's just part of the gig.
Thanks, Matt. Sherry?
Yeah, when I think back on my career, probably the most significant thing I had to scale back was research during a time where we were down a speech manager, a speech language pathology manager, and a speech language pathology chief. And so I internally stepped into those two roles along with my other roles, which was probably having three full-time jobs was the most challenging time in my career. And I think at that point in time, as Matt was saying, you have to shift. And so I had to shift my focus to manage 75 new people to me. And so that was a really big challenge, leaving little time for research efforts. But that time did make me grow, though, as a leader and as a clinical administrator. So I do value that experience, even though it was very difficult, because on the other end of it, the leadership skills that grew from that were very helpful.
Thank you. Vicki?
I can't think of a moment where I had to take on three jobs like Sherry just described. But I can think of other moments where I needed to prioritize one or two things. And I remember getting some good advice during those times, which was done is sometimes better than perfect. Which was really hard for me. Sometimes I really want things to be absolutely perfect and I want to put all my effort into making it perfect, but sometimes it just needs to be done. The other thing I wanted to mention on this topic was really trying to again, utilize that team approach, because you might have some specific deadline that needs to get done, and leaning on that team to help cruise control in some of those other areas. Like at the moment, we have a couple audiologists on maternity leave and different things like that. And it just, when you're shorthanded, you're like, well, then you can't grow a program. You just kind of have to manage what you have. So we kind of just have to cruise. And at certain times when our staffing's back up or the stars align, then you can grow and improve. But sometimes it's okay just to let things be in cruise and be the best it can be and not perfect.
Thanks, Vicki. Devin?
Yeah, I think research is always going to be on the chopping block, I guess. But, I guess the big one that happened was when I transitioned from Mayo, which is very clinical centric. Remember, I said that biggest shield is they are all about patient care, and research is kind of a nice secondary to it. And when I went to Michigan, transitioned here, it's all about the research and everything else. And so what I started to learn, I brought some grants with me and I got some other ones. And what I figured out is there's no way I'm personally going to oversee, every project detail. And it reminds me of that Steve Jobs. I mean, I credit Steve Jobs. You want to go fast, you go alone. You want to go, you want to go far, you go together. And so I really invested. You really have to become good at building strong teams, mentoring trainees. You got to connect with collaborators. You got to let go of the direct involvement. There's otherwise you're just going to drown. And so wasn't always comfortable. But ultimately, it let both the research and administration missions grow for me. But I mean, I was cold calling people. And so now, and what has been great is now I have many, many collaborators. I don't have to do all the work. I don't have to do all the writing, but it gets done. And if you don't care who gets credit, everybody wins. And I think that's sort of the thing I've adopted is like sometimes you're first author, sometimes you're not, but you're getting the work done. And it's all about and you learn so many new things. So I think it's really about empowering teams and developing those to stay alive in this kind of job. So
Well, staying with you, Devin, it sounds like the next question was about one role that may demand more compromise. It sounds like you were kind of implying that maybe it was research.
always going to be the research because you're there to serve the patient, right? And that's Mayo Clinic. I'll just go back because they do it right. Their motto is the patient first. It's literally that simple, as you probably know, severe being there. That's it. So clinical care and administrative responsibilities, as they are, often come with these fixed timelines, right? You've got to see the patient. You've got to have this dashboard done by this time. And research, you can say, well, I can postpone it. I can hit the next grant cycle. Scientific progress depends on sustained effort, right? It's not this like yeah, I can't do it, but you can go right and you got to go do something, go right. You have to block these times. And so you have to be very intentional, as Sherry and everyone else has said about blocking your time. That may mean nothing if somebody doesn't, the clinician doesn't show up. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just go back to surrounding myself with good collaborators and trainees who keep these projects moving, even if you can't by yourself. So it's leaning on other people. That's what I've learned. Yeah.
Thanks. Matt?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, everyone's right when they say the patient always comes first, and that's true. But I could kind of go back to the same thing. You can do things you can't do otherwise. I don't want you guys to walk out of this kind of thinking like, oh my God, you just get bombed with patients all the time and you're swallowing admin and everything sucks kind of in this role and you're just jumping around. I mean, I think, I want to also focus on the positives and try to encourage as many of you as possible to think about careers in academic medicine. I think this is because for all this, all the challenges that we face, there are so many things that you can do and so many opportunities that present themselves. And those opportunities can present themselves in a way that really allows us to shape patient care. And so I think these are, so yeah, I scale back sometimes. I enhance other things, the patient part that's always there, but that's also rewarding. I mean, it's like you can make a dramatic impact on someone and you can see these things immediately. And these are powerful things.
Thank you. Sherry?
Yeah, Devin took my answer. So it's about the people that you build around you, I think, that is going to help you succeed, especially when one role is demands you to compromise for another. Yeah, I don't really have much to add.
I'll take an optimistic approach as well. As Matt just mentioned, there's, sometimes the clinic can pull you in and you're unexpectedly seeing a patient, but you might have just changed that patient's day or life and you get to have that experience. Or in other times you may have completed some really amazing research project and you get to relish in that accomplishment. So sometimes these opportunities in this challenging environment in a career, don't not take advantage of these accomplishments and have the opportunity to really celebrate them and slow down and say, before I run off to the next thing that's on my to-do list, let me celebrate this win, let me celebrate this accomplishment, either mine or a team members or a mentees. So you can kind of keep that glass half full as much as possible and stay optimistic.
Thanks, Vicki. Okay, so this is a kind of a closing question for anybody that's thinking that this sounds like a good path, and you guys have sort of already ended it on a good note. But What's one hard truth sustaining all three that you wish you had understood earlier? Starting with Vicky.
This is a difficult question. One truth I wish I would have known earlier is you don't have to accomplish all of it right now, especially if you're going to be getting into this role from like is your first faculty position or a junior faculty moving into a leadership responsibility role. You don't have to change everything that first day that you have this new role. Enjoy the process, learn from it, learn from the mistakes, grow from them, and over time, so much will be accomplished. It doesn't have to happen overnight.
Thank you. Sherry?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to surrounding yourself with team members. That's really, really critical to equip your clinical staff, your clinical leadership, your research team members to really support and work in that team environment. I think that trying to do it all yourself is a lot and you're not going to succeed, but just really surrounding yourself with strong team members, collaborators, and I think that's really going to help move your whole portfolio forward.
Thanks. Matt?
One subtle piece of advice I always give to anyone thinking about this is learn what your institution values. What do they want? Because I think that often kind of shapes what you can do in terms of putting your imprint on the department, shape kind of research and other administrative allocations and in clinical care. I mean, some spots, Devin's given the example, Mayo, the patient care part comes first. And often that influences even sometimes the type of research or projects you do. I mean, yes, patient care comes first everywhere, but like Stanford likes innovation. They like disruption. They want us to be thought leaders and at the forefront of things. Some spots care about money. They care about, your hospital. What you'll find also in these roles is like there's what the hospital administration wants, and there's what your school of medicine administration wants, and they don't always want the same thing. I mean, everybody wants to make money. I mean, be clear, but your school of med administration wants to do cool things, and your hospital wants to maximize the revenue that they're generating because they use that to float all sorts of other things that happen at your university. I mean, that's why so many universities have academic medical centers because they can use that to offset revenue cuts at other ends of the university. So they funnel that money back. So this is but what does your institution want? What matters to them? And if they care about money or they care about patient flow, do they care about, do they care about certain types of research? Do they want you to get grants? Like do they want things that are high impact and they worry less if you have an R1 attached to it? So I think identifying what your institution wants, what they value, is a kind of a big step toward success in roles like this, and in navigating these competing demands.
Devin, you can finish it
Yeah,
off here.
I think that's excellent. I'm going to piggyback off what everyone has said. I think you also have to not only know what the institution wants, I think you have to know what you want. And I think your career goes through what I call seasons. And so I have moved from Henry Ford to Vanderbilt to Mayo to now Michigan. And what happened is I moved because I wanted different things as I matured and I wanted to grow a research program, wanted more, and at Vanderbilt, very academic, teaching, writing grants, clinic, not such a big thing there, big, but now Michigan, more academic. So some seasons in your career, when you start out, you're going to want to build your scientific credibility. You want to get promoted. Those are things that are important. And then when you get to a certain point, you're like, well, do I want to, I felt like, I'm ready to advance. I'm sort of capped out where I am. And so I should go look around, see what else is out there. And so then you develop your clinical excellence. And then maybe you want to really go far in leadership and move up through administration. So I think the key is not trying to maximize all three of these simultaneously. It's understanding where you are in your career, what season you're in, and then just get fully committed and learn everything you can in that environment. And again, going back to work-life harmony, if you're happy in your job, could be happier at home. If you're happy at home, you're going to be happier in your job. And I think it's that cycle that you just need to really, it's a dynamic sort of situation that's just ongoing. So yeah, I guess I'll leave it there.
Thank you everyone for you know all these interesting comments that you've had and your perspectives. And we do have some time now for people to ask questions. And so I'll open it up, either just speak out or you can put a question in the chat, whichever you prefer. Okay, here's the first question. Hi, I'd use video audio, but oh, okay, you're doing Peloton. Cool. Please describe how you would help a clinician carve out protective research time in their schedule. Somebody want to take that?
Get a grant and convince your administrator. That's not...
This comes back to how does your place run? I mean, really, I mean, so what a lot of places, are moving toward is, like, again, your audiologists are probably hospital employees. And what does your hospital want? Your hospital wants to see as many patients as possible and generate revenue. So from their perspective, if you are blocking somebody for research time, then you are taking time away from the mission, and from their roles as an employee. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying this is what your average hospital administrator is thinking. And I think this is a spot where the world has changed. I think there's a lot easier to block things like 20 years ago. And nowadays it's a lot tougher because, the focus everywhere is on slot utilization and efficiency and volume and all your metrics. And I see Sherry and Vicky nodding because they got dashboards telling them all this stuff. And this is just the nature of the beast. So I think, so Devin joked, but he's right. It's money at that point.
But Matt, also the administrators will say, yeah, you're going to pay for their time, but you're not going to pay, I'm paying
Right.
more than their time. I'm going to, that person generates 3 times their salary in
Yep.
patient care and decreases access. And you're telling me you're going to buy out their salary and pay it. So they lose. And they're like, no, you can't have that person.
Yeah, they don't
So you
want,
got,
yeah, they don't
so
want
you
to
got
do
to
it.
convince them. You got to be convincing. You got to show it makes your clinic better. You got to show them that this is going to lead to better patient care. We're going to be innovative. And that's the pitch I think most of us use. I don't know. I'd like to hear what other people say, but
Oh, go ahead, Sherry.
Yeah. So one approach that I take when I can't accomplish protected research time for a clinician who's interested in having research experience. So I try to listen to clinical staff and what are your career goals? And if they say, I want to participate in research, and they don't necessarily always want to lead their own research project, but they want to participate in research. So, at an academic medical center, there's always trials going on where they need audiology support. And so they go through the clinic. And so I try to make sure those clinicians get to participate in those opportunities. Or sometimes I can bring a clinical trial to the clinic and then carve out time for that audiologist to collect the data for that trial. So it may not be that they're leading their own, RO1, but they're participating in research in some way, kind of meeting their goals, and then offering them a way to maybe participate on presentations or publications might help that individual clinician reach those goals.
If there was an individual who was job searching, I would be asking for that up front as well. If that is something you want, sometimes in that negotiation phase of a new job, you might have that opportunity to ask for that protected research time, at least for a portion of the time, then bring in your own grants and so forth. It's much harder when you're in a position and they already know you can make tons of money in the clinic to then take you out of your money generating opportunity. But if you are in the clinic and you're grinding it out, then it may be going back to what is the mission of your institution. If your mission is academic medicine, then it usually comes with scholarly activity, and that can be seen as another form of dollar amount. So if you can show them that you can produce that, maybe you'll have the opportunity to protect some of your time.
Thank you. Another question, if a grad student is interested in all three of these areas, what is the best way to find positions that combine them? The career path seems less obvious than for more traditional roles.
I have my own thoughts on this. Like, first, get your science right. If you want to be at a spot that really allows you to do science, and the value of science in that role, which is, I think, why you would want to go into that. The standards for getting hired at a lot of these universities are high, and you can only do that if your science is right. So make sure that your science is as good as you can. Then I think a subtle thing also is kind of how do you, I think it helps also on a clinical end. I actually think in many ways you're better off being a specialist than a generalist. I think having a couple things that you do really well so that when your department chair says, we got this patient or we got this donor that's coming through, we want to blah, 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 that you got something that you are just aces at. And that helps you also with credibility amongst your staff. Because a lot of times you walk into ththese roles and you might have a group of experienced clinical audiologists that look at you and say, you haven't been in a clinic in 15 years or 10 years or whatever. Like, what are you going to teach me? What are you going to do here? So I think knowing your stuff in one area and making sure that area is tied to your research and that your research is as strong as can be, I think this is kind of how you get there. And another part, and then it comes down to networking and things like that. But I think get your science right and making sure that you can ideally tie specialized clinical activity in an area to your science where you could define yourself and use that also to sell yourself, so to speak. When you want to get a job like this, you got to create a narrative for those administrators and people looking to hire you. So if they bring you aboard, what are you going to get? And this is, and so I think that makes you a lot more marketable for these types of jobs down the line, and it makes it more feasible that you can succeed in it.
Any other questions?
I have a question, if I can use my mic.
Sure.
So I'm just curious about, because obviously as a clinician scientist, you're not going to have as much time to do research. So are the standards for like working up through the academic hierarchy and tenure track evaluation different? Like for instance, and I'm sure it's different for every school, but like you have to have this amount of papers, this amount of grants. Like, is that different if you're doing clinical work at the same time?
That's a good question. Very good question.
So I can jump on this a little bit, and then I'll let other people jump in because this is going to vary a lot institution by institution. So, for example, Stanford has different faculty lines in the School of Medicine, and some are based predominantly, almost exclusively on clinical care. And with that clinical care comes education. So those sorts of things, again, the focus of clinical care, education, and that's going to be for audiologists, maybe for residents, potentially for medical students. So there's that. And then, at Stanford, they have a clinical line, and then they have like what they call a university medical line. And these are for people whose job is to combine academics, with clinical care and everything else. And I gotta say, I don't think they really pull their expectations back on lines like that very much at all. They are every bit as much as what you might expect at other academic institutions, and because you got to pull your weight. If you're at Duke or Michigan or South Florida, you got to pull your weight. And that holds true academically. So I think it depends on what line you come in at as to what you're doing. But if you want to do the science, I mean, this is just, you learn. And that's where part of like knowing what you want to do and then knowing, integrating that to some extent with your clinical care, and leveraging accordingly. I think that's where you go a long way.
Dimitri, it's great to see you, and that was a great question. And I would agree with Matt fully that wherever you're at, make sure from the moment that you are considering joining that institution, you have their appointment and promotion and tenure guidelines in your hand, and you know what's going to be asked of you, and you know that your effort is aligned to meet those goals. If they're going to ask you to be a full-time clinician and then also ask you to get 2 R01s and publish 20 papers within 3 years, no Superman can do that. But if you know up front what they're asking of you, that can help you negotiate to make sure you have the protected time that you might need to get there. And it's usually not flexible. You usually can't maybe change what those rules and guidelines are in place, but you might be able to advocate that your clinical trial that you did can be considered maybe equivalent of an R level grant or something, there might be some ways to show that, you're very different from maybe a full-time bench scientist, but this is added value because you are a clinician scientist.
I mean, I gotta say, Dimitri, it's something you'll see happen a lot is they might start people on the research line, but if they like you and things are going well, but you're having trouble keeping up, they just convert you to a clinical line if they want to keep you around. And that's something that I've seen happen with our physician partners. This is if they're having trouble kind of, maintaining the lab, then they just kind of convert it to a clinical line. But that's something that you see routinely as well.
We have 5 years. If you're unpromoted, you go to a clinical line.
Yeah.
If the physician scientists can't get to where they need to be.
Yeah. And
They're on a clock the minute they walk in the door.
Yep. And all of it depends what your chair wants. You will find in, Samira serves, if you're a chair in a university environment, it's kind of a service level role where you're helping out the department in many regards. And I think they give chairs in a lot of academic medical departments a lot of power to shape and do what they want to do. So it's like this is so what does your chair want? And what do they see? And that'll hold a big sway in these sorts of things as well.
But Dimitri, I'm going to say this. I think the tenure thing is changing. They are very few. They have to go to the dean and ask, can I have a faculty tenure line? They're hard to get. And if you're in a clinic and you're an administrator, yes, it's hard, but man, you're never going to want for your job. And you know what? In our institution, the tenured people get paid exactly as much as the clinical faculty. It's the same. So, and he said, if you don't get funding as a tenured professor, you're going to leave anyway. So, I mean, it's in my world right now with NIH funding. I mean, as a clinician, I feel okay, right? I feel a little better because the pay lines are getting so hard, and so there's a little bit of like I can go, I go 100% clinic and still get a paycheck, right? So it's getting a little weird out there right now. Just being blunt.
No, thank you. And that's really, really good information. Thank you.
Let's see. It's almost 8. Looks like we have a thank you to everyone.
I put a heart on it I don't know, is that weird? I put the heart on the chat. I felt like I should do that. It was a nice comment.
That's nice. A thumbs up is also nice.
I read it and I felt I should do something, so I did that. So I appreciate that.
Well,
Taylor's doing, great. She's a clinician, but she's also taking it upon herself to do kind of research on what I lovingly call the night and weekend plan, which, a lot of us work on at different points in times. And so Taylor, I want to tip the cap, give you credit, for kind of taking the effort to do that. And you find, of course, your ability to do this will wax and wane. Sometimes you get tired, silly things like this, but this is, thank you. We got a lot of hearts coming for Taylor. This is perfect.
Yeah, load those hearts up for Taylor. Yeah,
you guys
Taylor.
are so nice. I appreciate it. It's nice to hear some giants in our field struggle with the same things that I do. So thank you guys.
Well, I really want to thank everyone for attending this session. We were talking about what we would do if it was just the 5 of us, and we thought we'd just chit chat, but it's nice that you came, and I really want to thank our panelists for joining us. I think this was a really interesting and inspiring. You ended on a really positive note, that it sounds like you don't hate your job, so that's a good thing.
4 out of 5 days I don't hate my job. 3 out of 5 I don't. There's some ratio in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, there will be days.
Yeah.
Trust me, there are moments of but look, what I'd say to all of you, for those of you that are thinking kind of in the short or long term, feel free to reach out to any of us. There's Sherry and Vicky and Devin are all tremendous resources, and they would be and I'm sure that I'll be happy to. I'm a lazy guy, so I probably won't help, but they will. So that's how it'll be.
Oh, one thing too. I told them I would do this. The Audiology Clinician Scientists Collective. Samara, you brought this up. You guys should join if you're interested in this. It's Sam Hauser and Jane Mondell. Used to be Jane Burton, I think, when we were at Vanderbilt together. So so you should join. There's a collective and a group of us that are doing that, and you can discuss these issues off, they have events and things like that. So it's a really cool thing to join. So
Yes. Okay, well, I hope I'll see some of you in the future at a conference or at ARO or somewhere. We do have a relatively small community, so it is likely that I'll see some of you. So thank you very much and have a good evening. Good
Thank you.
night.
thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.